The museums are important because they hold collections. And here in the Natural History Museum in London, we have a very large collection that's been made over several centuries. So we have collections from Captain Cook's expedition to Australia. We have collections collected through the 19th and 20th century. And we use these collections as proxies to understand the way the world used to be.
When I was little, we used to come to the museum a lot, and I would always tell my parents that I was going to work here, and they always sort of was just like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea and we hope you do it, but I don't think they ever quite thought I would end up here. And now I'm doing my Masters at Imperial College London, but I'm based here in the museum every day, and I would say it probably is a dream come true. My main research focus is fossil coral reefs. Okay, yeah, so in here we've got some of our older specimens, and they're not necessarily old in terms of the, like their fossils, but these were collected a long time ago in terms of the Natural History Museum's history. So we've got a beautiful example here. So here we've got 55, 12, 7. So it's collected on the 7th of December in 1855. So yeah, just a few of the extra old coral specimens that we have in here. We do have actually got some specimens that were collected aboard Cook's voyages. So they are some of our oldest specimens here.
By the middle of the 19th century, the British Museum's collection of animals and plants, gathered by explorers and merchants as they travelled and expanded the territories of the British Empire, had grown too large to be displayed at Montague House in the West End of London. Plans were drawn up for a more suitable building, and in 1881 the entire collection was moved to its present home in South Kensington, under the guidance of the renowned naturalist Sir Richard Owen. Throughout the 20th century, collectors continued to bring back exotic specimens from around the world. And today, the Natural History Museum houses not just dinosaur skeletons and stuffed creatures, but over 80 million examples of rare and in some cases extinct species of animals and plants.
Back about 100 years ago, collectors wouldn't have thought twice about just chopping a bit of coral off the reef. Which, as we know today, is not obviously the best thing to do with how endangered coral species are. But back 100 years ago, it was not known that humans had such a big impact on any ecosystem, let alone now marine ecosystems.
These ones have been nicely packaged too.
Yeah.
So they've been stored
Scientists say the Great Barrier Reef is experiencing its worst coral bleaching event on record.
Exclusive footage of the Great Barrier Reef shows what could be the most severe and extensive coral bleaching on record.
Reef after reef destroyed by bleaching.
Early this year, the US agency which monitors bleaching put Northern Territory waters on a red alert for coral mortality.
We've had a heat wave underwater.
It is devastating.
So I don't feel like with media and things like that we should be so down and depressing about the coral reefs. Otherwise people do just say, oh, what is the point? They're going to go anyway. You have to maintain positive, you have to be positive. The scientific community and reef restoration community has to be positive. Because if we're not going to do it, then who is? And then we will lose reefs. My name is Michelle Davis. I'm the Deputy Aquarium Curator here at the Horniman Museum in Forest Hill in South East London.
In the late 1800s, Frederick John Horniman inherited the largest tea business in the world. Hitching a ride on his own ships, he travelled the empire, indulging his passion for collecting. And by 1901, the museum he had commissioned in South East London was ready to accept his vast collection. During his lifetime, he amassed over 30,000 objects, ranging from musical instruments to masks, native costumes, and hundreds of stuffed animals. In contrast to traditional museums of the day, the Horniman Museum was designed to include both a zoo and an aquarium, and still today holds an important collection of fish and tropical corals.
Project Coral initially started around 5 years ago with the main aim to get the corals to spawn in captivity. But because we are based in central London, we will never be able to reseed the reef with our own colonies that we're growing. It's all about creating these research systems to replicate specific geographical locations. So looking at the Australia Great Barrier Reef and a reef in Singapore.
Conducting research in a museum is much different to conducting research in a university. And I'm sure the original collectors like Richard Owen would be very shocked with how we've changed. 100 years ago, somebody would fund your trip and you would just take whatever you want and you wouldn't have to worry about getting a permit. In here you can see the internal structure of the coral. So you'd have like a soft-bodied animal sitting on top of each of those holes, and what they do is they lay down a layer of calcium carbonate each year after they grow, and it actually forms like a structure that looks like a tower block. So you see like each little window of where the coral would have sat that year. But yeah, so I love Acropora, it's so beautiful. You can see there where it's probably attached to the rock. But like this one, a lot of the actual history and life history and where they would have been growing is not known because there's not enough data. I mean, I don't know where this one was. This was 1984, so even then, you know, scientific collection wasn't as great as it is now. They aren't like human remains. We can't put them back where they came from, and there's nothing we can do for what we've taken already. We do, however, focus on sharing our knowledge, and obviously one of the key things with corals is taking that knowledge and passing it on to the local population, and so that they know how to manage the reefs in situ best for it to be around for many more generations.
So I'm proofing off any cyanobacteria that can basically smother the coral. So usually we siphon the corals, but every morning we do give them a bit of a poof to make sure there's no sediment or anything settled on the corals. Keeping them happy. Happy corals.
So we have these old specimens that were collected maybe 100 or 150 years ago, and we're able to use new technologies on them. And with these, we can understand how the corals were growing, were they healthy, what types of organisms and other life forms were living inside the coral colonies, and reconstruct the ecology of coral reefs as they were 100 years ago.
And then step back so I don't interfere with the shot, and it takes a nice photo of my corals.
The UK is unique because it had access to places all around the world for making collections in the past, and now we benefit from this history, and we're somehow taking the past and moving into the future.
These guys are so old and different. But even if they weren't collected in the most ethically sourced way, if we didn't use them, it would be a waste to have collected them in that manner. So my research is looking at 20 million years ago, but people have done 6 million years ago and 1 million years ago and present day. Well, what about if we combined that data and said, hey, look, well, we know what these corals have looked like and been like in this one area for over 20 million years. Here's what we could see in the future. And also from that data, you'd be able to see if what we're seeing today is normal or a baseline or to be expected, and then they'll grow back and be healthy in the next few years. Because corals have faced climate change numerous of times and survived. It's just whether or not this one is happening too fast.
The fossil corals housed in museums across Britain offer researchers a uniquely long-term perspective on what may otherwise seem like a solely contemporary crisis. Even though the cabinets look the same, museums across the world today are unrecognisable compared even to a generation ago. And the scientists too are changing.
I hope that in 50 years' time, we still have these wonderfully amazing coral reefs. And I think we need to focus more of our energy into reseeding the reefs, getting little coral recruits like these out onto the reefs in a large scale, and make sure that we still have them 200 years in the future.
They're growing. We're sending frags out to different aquariums, different institutes, so that gene pool is surviving. I think it can be difficult to inspire people about something that they haven't seen. And I feel aquariums are really important because you can come and see up close corals and see all the different relationships of the fish, and it really brings it to life. It's really strange, but you do, when you work alongside corals, even though they do look inanimate, they're really not, and you can sort of get a sense of personality of each coral. And yeah, I think it's true, you shouldn't humanize corals, but you do think of them with personalities, with their likes and their dislikes, and they look unhappy today because all the polyps are retracted, or it's looking really good and healthy. So yeah.
The collection is something that is forever. Well, as much as anything is.